How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Gimel, Daf 73 of Masechta Ksubis. Friends, oh man, should I yawn? It would be strong. Yeah, friends, today we're talking about fellows Mekadesh a woman al Tanai, under a condition. So, so that's kind of what we're talking about, Lamaisa. So, let's jump in. We're going to start on Daf Ayin Beis, Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Itmar, who stated, Kidsha al Tanai v'konsa stam. We saw this in Masechta Yevamis. So, fellows Mekadesh a woman, betroths a woman under a condition, with a stipulation, under a condition. V'konsa stam, right? So the betrothal was with a stipulation, but then when they got married, so there was no stipulation. Rav Mitzriche Menuget. So Rav says, well, they're going to have to get a get. They're going to have to get a bill of divorce. Because, right, Kansa Stam, he married. Sure, Eina Chinami, when he betrothed her, there was a condition. But ultimately, when he married her, when the Kiddushin, by the Nisuin, so there were no conditions anymore. He didn't say any conditions. So they're married. Tzriche Menuget, and if they want to separate, so then they get a bill of divorce, a writ of divorce. They write up a get, and they do it, and he gives it to a get. They get divorced. Where Shmuel says that she does not receive a get because they're not married, because he betrothed her under a certain condition. The condition was not met, and even though when he married her, he didn't mention the condition, but Memele, when he married her, was under the assumption of the original outlines, which was, at the time of the betrothal, there were these conditions. So therefore Shmuel says, even though it was Kansastam, even though he didn't mention any conditions, any stipulations when they got married, but Memele, the initial conditions are still intact, and Eina Tzriche Menuget. If it turns out that the condition wasn't met, so then they're not married, and no get necessary. Omar Abai says, Abai lo tema time in the Rav came shekonso stam achuli achli tnoye. Now Abai clarifies that Rav's opinion, right? So Rav says that if he was mekadesh or al tanai, but vikonso stam, Rav says that she would need a get. So Abai says, don't think that the reason for Rav is that since he married her stam and didn't mention any conditions at the time of the nisuin, don't think that means that he reverted his initial requirements, that he no longer requires these conditions to be met. No, that's not why. Don't say that the reason for Rav saying that she needs to get a get is because when he then married her without mentioning the stipulation, he basically forgave the unrequired, relented, I don't know, forgave, went back on the original Tanai. Ela taime the Rav bilasnus. Rather, the reason for Rav is that a fellow doesn't want to have bia out of the context of marriage, for non-marital reasons. And therefore, the guy is saying like this, look, I still care about these conditions, but at the same time, if I'm marrying her and we're having bia, I don't want this to be a non-marital bia. So he says, look, I'm going to have bia l'shem nisuin, that we're going to be married. But these conditions are still important to me, and therefore if we get divorced, she's not going to receive her ksube because these conditions weren't met, but at the same time, we are married because, I had intention over here to be sleeping with my wife, not to be sleeping with my non-wife. So therefore, Rav says that she needs to receive a get, because when they had bia, it was al shem, as his wife. But he still cares about the stipulation, and therefore she won't need a ksubit. Okay, Fine, what do you want me to tell you? So therefore, according to Rab, so Kidsha al Tanai v'Konsa Stam, according to Rab, she needs a get. Abai says, but she won't get a Ksuba though. And Shmuel says, no get necessary because the condition was not met. In fact, the Gemara wants to know that we already saw this machlokas between Rab and Shmuel. Demar was stated, Ketana shel me'ano, v'igdila, barara, amda v'nises, and then she gets married. Ooh, wow. Friends, do you hear Masechta Yavam is calling? Do you hear Masechta Yavam is calling? Kitana Shalom Me'ano. So you have a Kitana, who of course got married by her brother or her mother, and she can just walk out of the marriage if she wants. But she didn't do that. And now she's an adult, and she remains with the guy, and they have Bia, and then she walks out, and then she leaves. So when she already got older, when she was already an adult, they had Bia, and then she left and marries another guy. So the question is she actually married to the other guy? Rav Omar says, Rav Ein Tzricha Get Misheni. Rav says she does not require a get from the second fellow because she was married to the original fellow. Now, she was a Ketana, so they weren't married midaraisa, but they were married midarabana. Now when she becomes an adult, they had Bia, right? She didn't yet walk out, so they had Bia. Says Rav, that Bia, right, the fellow, when he has Bia with her, is going to have Bia, the Shem Kiddushin, right? He's going to have Bia, the Shem Kiddushin. And therefore, at that point, they're going to be married midaraisa. And therefore, if they're married at that point midoraisa, when she leaves and marries somebody else, she can't marry that other fellow because she's still married to the first guy because he had Bia once they were an adult, the Shem Kiddushin, and therefore she doesn't need a get from the second fellow. And Shmuel says that she would require a get from the second fellow because he assumes that when she became an adult, and she had Bia with her first husband, the first husband was having Bia al Shem Kiddushin Arishon, with the intention of the initial Kiddushin, when she was a Ketana, and that's only Midrabanan. They were never married Midoraisa, and therefore, when she leaves and marries the second fellow, she's married to the second fellow, and therefore she would need to get from the second fellow. So we see that the same machlokas between Rav and Shmuel, that Rav says that Ein Adam Osa Bilasnus, and Shmuel says that that he's having Bia Aldas the Kiddushin Arishonim. So we already saw this machlokas before. So Tzricha. We need both. The Itmar Be'ahi, if we would only have the case of the Kitana, Be'ahi Ka'amar Rav. In that case, Rav says that they would be considered married, right, to the first guy. Mishum deleko tanoya, because he didn't make any conditions, any stipulations about Bahadika tanoya. But over here, where there's a stipulation that he says that I'm only going to be Makadesh under certain conditions, I would say that maybe you would agree with Shmuel that if the conditions are not met, they wouldn't be married, no get required. And if you would have this case of the marriage on the stipulations, this is where Shmuel says that they would not be married because of the stipulations. But I might think that when there are no stipulations, like by the Ketana, maybe when she becomes an adult and they have Bia, they would be considered married. Tzricha, therefore we need our case as well to say that in that case, with the stipulations, Shmuel still says that, wait, what? Where am I? That in that case, even though there are, what? Where? What? Wait, what? Yeah, exactly. Meaning, in our case, I would say that Shmuel would say that they're not married because of the stipulations, but in the case of the Ketana, where there are no stipulations, maybe we would agree with Rav that they would be considered married. Tzricha, therefore we need both cases. Lemaise. Tanan. We learn in our Mishnah, Konso stam v'nimtzu alea nidarim. Ba para para. So our Mishnah had said What did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said, a fellow betrothed is a woman under the condition that there are no vows. Fine. It turns out that there are vows. She's not betrothed. Now, says the Mishnah, if he marries her stam, and it turns out that there are vows, she doesn't get, they get divorced and she doesn't receive a ksuba. Now, we want to assume that whole flow is one flow. That he betrothed her under the condition that she hadn't made any vows. And then if he marries her stam, and it turns out that there are vows, she needs to get a divorce. So, Tanan konsa stam v'nimtu aleh nedarim, if he then married her stam, and it turns out that she had made vows in advance, teitzish lo b'chsuba, she gets divorced and does not receive her ksuba payment because she had made vows. Ksuba udilo baya, so she doesn't get a ksube, hagita baya, but she requires a get. Which means that even though he was mikadesh or al tnai, but vikansa stam, she still needs a get. So my lab, kitcha tnai vikansa stam, we're talking about where he's mikadesh or with a condition, and then he married her stam, and we're saying that she needs a get yufta de Shmuel. So it's a kasha on Shmuel who says that mikadesh al tnai vikansa stam does not require a get, but Shmuel is saying over here that take would not require a get, but our Mishnah seems to be saying that she would require a get. Lo, our Mishnah is not talking about where he was mikadesher al tanai and then konsa stam. Kidsha stam the konsa stam. When the Mishnah is saying that she needs a get, that's because he was mikadesher stam and konsa stam. What? Yeah, exactly. It was Mikadesh or Stam, Vikonsa Stam, and then it turns out that the Neradarim, so in that case, she needs a get. Aval Kidsha al Tanai Vikonsa Stam. But if he would be Mikadesh or al Tanai, and then even though he's Kones Stam, Hachinami de Lobaya Gita, I think it's Takakasha. So Aval Kidsha al Tanai Vikonsa Stam, Hachinami de Lobaya Gita. So then would you say that she doesn't require get? So Shmuel, are you really saying that if he was Mikadesh or al Tanai and then Konsa Stam, no get would be necessary? But if that's the case, the Mishnah says that he betrothed her under the condition that she had not made any vows. And it turns out that there are vows. Eino mikudeshes. So then she is not betrothed. But one second. Lesne, why don't we just say this, right? That if he was Mekadesh woman al tonight, and then Konsa Stam, go straight into that part. Konsa Stam, he then marries her Stam, Vinimtsu alea nedarim, and then it turns out that the nedarim, Eino mikudeshes. She is not mikudeshes. V'chol shekain, Shmuel, if you're saying that if he's mikadesher al tanai, and then he marries her stam, and we're saying that they aren't married, so just go straight into that case. Say if he was mikadesher al tanai, and then he marries her stam, so they're not married, and then kol shekain, certainly in a situation where they didn't actually get married, right? He was just betrothed her, and then it turns out that there are nedarim, so then eina mikudeshes. But we're saying that even if he was konei stam, if we're going to say that even if he was konei stam, eina mikudeshes, so just go straight into that. Say if he was mikadesh al tanai and konei stam, eina mikudeshes, and then certainly if he's just simply mikadesh al tanai that she doesn't have any nedarim, and then it turns out that she does have nedarim, and meile, it wouldn't be a good kedushin. But from the fact that we specifically say he was mikadesh or right, that on the condition that she doesn't have any nedarim, and it turns out that there are nedarim, eina mikudeshes, it sounds like that's a separate thing. And then if it's konsa stam, it would be right teitzeh shlo b'chsuba. Then she would be married and she would have to receive a get. So says the Gemara, Hachi nami ka'amar. So the Gemara says that's in fact exactly what it's saying. A fellow betrothed a woman under the condition that she does not have any vows. V'konsa stam, and then he was kone stam. V'nimtzu aleh nedarim, and then it turns out that there were nedarim. Eina mikudeshes, she is not betrothed. Kidsha stam v'konsa stam. But if he is mekadesh her stam and then marries her stam, teitze shelo b'ksubis, then she gets divorced and does not receive a ksuba. Ksuba udlo baya, she doesn't receive a ksuba hagita baya, but she does receive a get when he was kone stam, mekadesh stam and kone stam, and it turns out that there were vows. Umashna ksuba udlo baya. So now, fact the Gemara, if we're saying that she doesn't require, how come we're saying that she doesn't require a ksubah? Because he says, well, I don't want to be married to somebody who's making vows all the time. If that's the case, then they shouldn't be married at all. He shouldn't even require a get. Rabba says she requires a get midrabanan. It says that she needs a get midrabanan. Rava Amar says, Rava Tana Sapukim Sapkalik. So Rava says that actually the Tana was uncertain. The Tana was uncertain if it would be considered a proper marriage or not, and therefore Gabi Mamona Lakula Kabi Surah Lechumra. That when it comes to Ksuba, which is only money, monetary, so we say that she does not receive the Ksuba. But when it comes to the get, which is an Isser, so we say that she should receive a get. Amar Rabba says, Rabba, Machlokes b'tohu shtei noshim. So Rabba says that the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel is when it regards two separate women. Meaning, you have a guy and he marries a woman, and he marries the first woman al tanai, in the condition that she doesn't have any nedarim. And then he marries the second woman, but doesn't mention any kind of condition. So Rav says that since there was no condition, so they're considered married. Whereas Shmuel says, yeah, but since he had made the condition with the first wife, Memele, he probably wanted to make the same condition with the second wife, and therefore they're not married. If it turns out that there's nedarim. But if we're only talking about one woman, that he was Mekadesher with Al-Tanai, and then he was Konei Stam, certainly they would not be married if it turns out that she had nedarim. Amar Abaye says, "V'masnisin detosi sha'achas hi v'kamos vinon tiyuv tamine." But one second, but our Mishnah is talking about one woman. It's not talking about two women. So Eli Itmar Ochi Itmar, rather no. Rabba is saying the following. Amar Rabba says, "Rabba machlokas b'tos sha'achas ke'ein shtei noshim." The machlokas is b'tos with one woman that's like two women. What does that mean? That he was mekadesher al tanai, but then he divorced her, and then married her again, but this time without a stipulation. So Rab says that, well, this time there's no stipulation, she would need a get. Shmuel says, no, but the first time there's a stipulation, so Memele, it's the same stipulation here, and she does not need a get. Aval, but if it's simply that he was Mekadesher al Tanai, and then Kone Stam, get, certainly she would not require a writ of divorce from him. Abaye asks a kasha. Kidsha b'ta'us, we have a brayso that says that if the fellow is mekadesh by accident, there are people yelling outside, ufalchus mishvei pruta, or if he's mekadesh with less than a pruta's value, v'chin kohen shekidesh, also if you have a minor, people are yelling and screaming outside. Also if you have a minor who is mekadesh a girl, betrothed a girl, even though when he's a gadol, when he gets older, he sends all sorts of gifts and stuff. They're not married, she's not betrothed. Because even when he gets older and he sends these gifts, he's sending it with the intention of the initial kedushin, which he did when he was a katan, and that doesn't work. But if they have bia, so then it's kiddushin, kanu. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Mishum Bishmael Omar, in Ba'al Lo Kanu. Even if they are bia, there is no kinyan. Now, here we're only talking about one woman. And we're saying that there's a machlokas, right? There's a machlokas Tanakama and Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Mishum Bishmael. So my love, toes nidarim. When we say that there was a mistake, right? Kitcha b'toes, mistama means toes nidarim. And it's isha achas. And it's machlokas, whether it's kedushin or not. Lo, b'toes, pachus mishvei pruta. No, the mistake was that he was mekadesh with less than a shavet pruta. Pachus mishvei pruta, be'edju katoni lo. We mention pachus mishvei pruta separately. Kitcha b'toes, ufachus mishvei pruta. We gave separate examples. Either he was mekadesh by accident, which we want to say is nidarim, or he was mekadesh with less than a shvei pruta. Parusha kamifarish, the Gemara says no. The way to understand it is it's an explanation. Kid shabatos ketzad. What does it mean that he was mekadesh by accident? Kigon shekid shabapachus mishvei pruta, that he was mekadesh with less than the value of a pruta. And what's the machlokas between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon ben Yehuda? My sover adam yodea shein kedushin tovsim b'pachus mishvei pruta. Well, the Tanakama says that, well, the fellow knows that you're not allowed to be mekadesh with less than a shvei pruta. V'gam uva l'shem kedushin. So in the end, he had bia l'shem kedushin because he knows that the less than the shvei pruta was not going to cover it. Umar sovar ein adam yodea shein kedushin tovsim b'pachus mishvei pruta, that a fellow knows that a fellow does not know that kiddushin is ineffective with less than a shvei pruta. V'chika ba'al adaita the kiddushin rishonim ba'al. When he's having bia, it's based on it's with the assumption of the initial kiddushin, which were not valid. Eisvei, we have a kasha arini po alech amanas sheyirtze abba. If she says that she will have bia with him under the condition that her father is okay with it, the Tanakhama says that even though the father is not okay with it, so then she's still mekudeshes. If the father is interested, so fine, then she's betrothed. But if he's not interested, then she's not betrothed. So here is considered like a mistake by, it's only one woman. We seem to have machlokas of whether she's betrothed or not. So no, this is the machlokas. That when it says, one opinion is that when it says under the condition that the father will be quiet, and the father is nonetheless quiet, so the condition was met. That's why they're married. Whereas the other opinion is that it's under the condition that the father will agree and say yes, but over here he did not say yes, so therefore they're not considered married. Friends, that was Af Ein Gimel of Masechta Ksubis. There was some interesting stuff in this daf, the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel, where Rav says Ein Adam Osed Bilasu Bilaz Nus, and therefore he's going to make sure that they are married. So even if he was mekadesh initially with a t'nai, but then kansa stam, even though there was initially a t'nai, a stipulation, but if they're getting married, he's going to get married with the intention of getting married, regardless of the stipulations, and therefore they're considered married. Whereas Shmuel says no, that when they get married, it's under the initial assumptions, which is that they were nidarim, and if those nidarim are violated, so then they wouldn't actually be considered married. Friends, that was Daf Ein Gimel of Masechta Ksubis. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out. Bye.